everyone. We're so glad to see all these wonderful names joining us here this evening. Today is July 21st, 2026, and I'm Lindsay Pollock, Provost at Sarasota University. Um, I'm delighted to introduce our guest speaker, Sarah Kennedy-Berge, who is joining us from the land of the ever glowing sun, Norway. It's 1 a.m. there, and we're just so grateful that she's staying awake. To be with us because she has a very important message. If you haven't read her book yet, Montessori in the Digital Age, I strongly recommend it. It's got something for everyone, especially Montessori practitioners who are struggling with this dilemma of how to incorporate Montessori and the digital tools that we have at our disposal. Sarah is an incredible human being. I'm so happy to know her in our Montessori circles. She's a researcher, a classroom practitioner, a Montessori educator, and a director of European Montessori College. So, Sarah, I'll turn it over to you. And again, thank you for being here with us this evening.
Thank you, Lindsay. That was very kind. I am very honored, flattered, and very excited to be with you all this evening. And as you said, it's an important topic now, and it's ever prevalent. I feel like it's always there, no matter where we're scrolling or where we're talking. It's always a discussion about this, the digital age, and here we are as Montessorians trying to navigate. So I'm just going to start my presentation here. So this conversation, I think, is important to have, and I'm really excited to be able to share that with you this evening. And as
Sarah,
Lindsay said, yeah.
I know something we talked about before we started was if folks have questions to drop them in the chat, and we'll be monitoring that as well.
Perfect. Please do. That's wonderful. It's important to get a good conversation going. So thank you for that. And yes, if I'm yawning throughout, it is 1 in the morning, so it isn't you. I will do my best to stay awake. This is something that keeps me going. So today, I think the conversation is now going to be, yes, we're in a digital world. Technology is here. What are we going to do about it? And so the main focus needs to be on what is our purpose when we're using these tools. How can it encourage this creativity? And the biggest part is staying still human-centered, so that we are only using these as tools, as ways and means of following along in the creativity that we have naturally. And of course, we all know that our world is changing faster than we can keep up. When I wrote the book, AI was barely coming out in the common usage, but now we have this whole new emerging technology, and we don't know what's coming next. We can barely guess what's coming next, and yet we still, as practitioners, have to find a way to understand it and bring it into our practice. And the world that our children are growing up in is changing. It's different than the world I grew up in. It's different than the world where the students that I had 15 in the classroom 15 years ago are in. And so we need to find out, how can we really understand the tools and understand the reality that these children are living in. And that is difficult for us because we are still adults. We still are coming with our biases, with our own fears, our experiences. And so to understand the world that the children are growing up in is a challenge for us. We just, in March, the Montessori Europe Congress, the theme was the courage to trust. And I think that is something that is really important to think about in this context, where we're in a space where we no longer are the all-knowing adults. We have to be someone who can trust and observe and watch the children and the students that we have now, our young people, the way they navigate and work with these tools, and to actually let go of some of that control that we all know as teachers we need control, but how can we let go of that to really have that courage to trust the child that they will also find their way in navigating it. Whereas we need to come with the knowledge and the experience that we have from our life experience, our lived experience, but also to bring it in to help them be able to navigate this. Because childhood has changed, the way it looks, the way it maybe was compared to my childhood, my parents' childhood, it has changed. But being a human has not. Being the child has not. The same needs, the same frustrations, the same energies, they are still there. But we have different things around us, and that is really what we want to look at. And one of the things that I've been noticing most now is there's this huge balance between how can we protect the children, which of course is important. Of course, we're going to protect our children in a world where there are dangers. But I want to rather bring it back. We children. And how do we do that? What does preparing our children look like? And for me, that it is something that we have to be prepared first. So the prepared adult that Montessori is writing so much about, that is what our role is now. We need to be preparing ourselves. How do we understand things? Because it's not technology that's the problem. It's how we are going to use the technology. And the it it's intrinsically just a thing. Technology is a thing. In the hands of the wrong people, can become a tool for harm, but it is all about how we use it. So actually, I wanted to ask this question. Throw your comment in the chat. When you think of technology in childhood, what kind of reactions? First thing that comes to your mind? Anything is there's no right answers here. I'm just interested to see, what kind of reactions do we have when we think about childhood and the interaction with technology? If there are comments here. Because I think for many of us, there's, we go between a fear, or we think we need to be cautious, which is very important. Of course, we need to be cautious. There could be innovation. There's room for creativity. I'm struggling to see the chat here. Of course, I'm giving a talk.
Monica says improved access and inclusion, and Janisha says advanced new ideas. Monica also added adaptive, and Dr. Bruce said age appropriateness is essential to use. Caroline Robbins says emphasis on creating work rather than consuming makes it more valuable.
Yeah, exactly. All of these are such important comments here. Thank you so much for all of you who are commenting there. I think there is no doubt that whatever technology we are bringing into our homes, into the classrooms, it must be age appropriate. There's no question here. But the point is that there are technologies that are appropriate for the different ages. Sorry, Lindsay.
Definitely. No, Sarah, Melissa added fear and excitement and a need to moderate and educate.
Yes.
Mara says technology can separate children from the natural world.
Yeah. Yeah. And that is another fear. So we have the span of emotion. If you look at the comments now, you've got a span from that, innovation, and we can bring things to the world. We can bring more accessible for students who wouldn't otherwise have access to things. But then there's also this a fear or a caution, which is good. These are these things that are in a balance, in a tension with each other. And I think that is safe. That is what is good. That is what we need to have.
Right.
But it needs
Dr.
to be a
Bruce,
balance.
oh, I'm sorry, Sarah. Dr. Bruce also added technology is a tool that can enhance the learning experience. And to your point, Sarah, we were having a conversation earlier as a faculty, and there was a whole range of emotions, among our faculty, from frustration with the tools and the technology to, I'm personally enamored by my Gemini right now because I'm just, really finding that it helps enhance my effectiveness and the
Yeah.
time and effort that I spend on some tasks that used to take me much longer. And I can see where this could be also very addicting
Yes.
and could potentially restrict some of my more creative avenues if I become overly reliant
Yeah.
on technology.
And this is precisely, in a nutshell, Lindsay, exactly what you're saying here. We, how can we have something that there is huge possibilities for and yet huge fear of? And it is because we need this balance. And so
Mhm.
all of these things that have been articulated is where this tension comes in. So when we think about how are we going to bring it into just, let's take it from a Montessori classroom point of view, there has to be a balance. There has to be an evaluation. It has to have gone through what I call the Montessori filter before you bring anything into your classroom, right? So it
Right.
needs to have gone through this thinking process of what is useful, what is purposeful, and how can it be used in a way that will help the child, support the child, increase their creativity, or will it just be a distraction, right? So these are all questions that we need to be in an open dialogue about, because there's no answer key here. This is something that we have to be in a constant discussion of.
Mhm.
Let me get back
Yeah,
to.
I find that some people are, at one extreme or the other when
Yeah,
it comes to
yeah,
this discussion.
yeah,
And I think what you bring, your wisdom is how to find those spaces in between, right?
yeah. Yeah, absolutely. This is a this is a quote that I have from my book, but I have it on stickers and everything. It's not the invention, it's the intention, right? So all of these technologies that we're talking about, the intention or the invention itself is not harmful. The invention itself is not something to be feared or something to just go and run with all the time. It is the intention behind it. So when we're thinking about, and of course, a big discussion today is either social media or AI, right? All of these tools are amazing tools that will help us, can be incredibly helpful in our day-to-day interaction. I can reach out to my family in the United States when I'm sitting over here in Europe in an instant. Thank you. I like these things, but when there's not a balance to it, when there's not a responsibility and this, really intention of using it for good, then it can be harmful. And so this is one of the things that we need to make sure that we have this discussion with our students openly. And they need to have, of course, if we're coming from a Montessori point of view with the principles that we know of freedom and discipline, there we cannot just give them the tools without having them understanding the responsibility of the use. And this is, I think, where we get into this tension is we want the children to have access to these wonderful tools, and yet have we explained how these work, what these tools do, what the responsibility, the ethical responsibility of this tool is before they're allowed to go ahead and just use it for what they need to. And I think the biggest thing that we can work on now is to think about technology as the practical life of our time. And Montessori writes about practical life that wherever possible, mechanical contrivances are introduced for every detail of practical life so that our children may be fitted to take part in a civilization which is entirely based on machines. And this was written 70 years ago, and yet it is still uh, so relevant today because even more so, our civilization is entirely based on machines, and it's going more and more towards that as well. And so, what is our task as educators? our task as adults who work with children needs to be that we introduce them to these tools as just that, as
Mhm.
tools, as helping things that can help us, just as we do with a pair of scissors, just as
Mhm.
we do with any other tool that we are going to introduce to our children that they need to be able to take part in civilization, to take part in society. And this brings me to one of these big discussions now is, the social media or AI that is, we had, or screens in general, where we had screens during COVID. Oh, great. We have screens in the classrooms. Everyone's getting an iPad here in Norway or in Scandinavia. Everyone gets an iPad and that's wonderful. And then they're realizing, oh, reading scores are going down a bit. There are some social things that we're seeing. Okay, take them all away again, right? There's no understanding of that moderation in all things, the balance between the two. It's not black or white. There has to be this balance of, yes, screens can be there. Does every student need one? Probably not. Can we have it on our shelf as a tool that we are selecting, choosing consciously to do a task, and then we can put it back on the shelf when we no longer need it for that task? Can you imagine that exercise of being able to make that? Do I need to have it in front of me all the time?
Mhm.
We had a discussion online about someone asking, do you use a screen or a tablet to do your planning and recording in your classroom? And someone said, well, I don't have a problem with it, but as long as the children never see you using it. And of course, I had to challenge that because I'm thinking, why do you not want them to see you using it? Because we want to model pencil and paper. Well, there's a
Right,
time for that. That was the answer. Well, there's a
right,
time and a place for papers and pencils also. But I'm thinking what a golden opportunity is being missed here. If the children can see us modeling, taking the tablet, doing our task, turning it off and returning it, that they don't
right,
see us constantly scrolling on our screen. And
right.
these are the examples that we need to show them in our behavior. How do we use the tools? And I'm guilty of being one of those who, when the iPhones first came out, it was the greatest thing ever, and we spent all this time on it. And so for me, I'm trying to wean myself from the screens and be able to get that, take responsibility for my own screen use. But what is it that I'm modeling for others, right? So how can do we put our phones down when we're talking with our children, or is it,
Right.
are we still scrolling while we're talking? All of these things. These are all the things that we need to consider when we are using technology and presenting it to the children during, our time with them in the classroom, but also as we're with them in society in general.
Mhm.
So the question really then becomes, what does it mean to be human in a digital world? you know, what does that mean
Mhm.
when the fear is that machines are taking over everything in the digital age? What's going on? And I think from a Montessori principle perspective, it could be, my book is Montessori in the Digital Age, but the same principles could apply at any age. It could be Montessori in the Ice Age. The same principles are going to apply. It doesn't matter. Yes, we are coming into a digital age where the tools that are being introduced are new to us, but the children are natives. They're growing up in this. They're
Mhm.
not afraid of it. We see possible dangers, and that's good. That's something that's our part of our role. But for them, it is just there. It is part of their everyday life. I think the fear for us comes from not understanding it. So being able to be the human in the digital world means, how can I use these to help me? How can I use these to help others? How can we use this to make society more equitable? Someone mentioned that we have this connection also, that others can have access to information and communication. All of these things that we can use for the betterment of society, but it comes back to being human. We're only using these as tools because from our humanity, we need these to do better communication, to do work more efficiently, perhaps, but we don't want to lose that creativity. And I'll get to that also when in a little bit when I'm touching on AI as well, what that means to have the human the human sandwich on either side of the tool. And as someone mentioned, we need to move from being the consumer with technology to being the active creator. So the passivity that we see of just, this, what we're, I think that's the biggest fear of screen use is that we're just sitting there and, starting to drool because it's just that passive intake versus that active using these tools to create something new. And we know that Montessori itself is a constructivist theory. It is something that we are constructing ourselves, and even more so with these tools that we're using them to construct new ideas, to experiment with things. Just like we use the trinomial cube, we are also going to be using these tools to help us verbalize and understand new concepts and new ideas. So if we can move from just using it as something that we're using it to just view or consume things, to then being able to create new with it as well. Because if we don't prepare our children to be creators, to use these tools, we're just going to be preparing them to allow themselves to be shaped by what they're seeing and what is being fed to them. And this is, I think, again, a basis of one of our big fears is that the technology is taking over and it's going to turn our children into zombies. And, we've all heard these arguments. But that's where we come in. That is where our responsibility is, that we have to show them how to be able to use these tools and how they can use them to create new things, to use in their learning as well. And of course, that changes based on where they are in their development. So as we see in the first 6 years, we want minimal technology because we want them exploring the real world. It's then when they get into the 6 to 12 years where they can then take that reality and begin to use that reasoning and start to think and create and ask the questions, those wonder questions, curiosity questions, and to research using these tools to then be able to take it further as they're moving into adolescence to make it that part of that responsibility and identity that they have to make it even a better world, to see where their place in society is, to say, I can use these tools to make it even better. I want to use these tools for good. So it's not just a question of how much technology, it's the kind of technology. And I think one of the comments was on exactly this. It's the age appropriate technology, when we use it and why we are using it. And if we can get our children to ask these questions, if we can promote this openness and this open discussion about the tools that we're bringing into our classrooms and what we are using them for, then I think we have a much better foundation for their future use of tools.
Mm-hmm.
But I just need to say that when we say we're preparing them for life, that doesn't mean preparing their children for adulthood. We're preparing them for 5 minutes from now when they're met with technology. We need to prepare them for now as well as later in life. Yeah. And fear is not preparation. I think this fear, it is good to have some fear that is in us from an evolutionary sense as well. But understanding what these technologies are and what they can do will help to reduce the fear so that we better understand it and can then prepare our children for it. But first, it requires that we prepare ourselves. We need to first understand what these tools are. Otherwise, we won't be able to know how to present it to our children. And I think there's this gap here as well where we've been thrown sort of educators, new educators today, they're getting thrown into the deep end of here's this technology, now we have to figure out how to bring it into the classroom. Okay, but let's take a step back. We need to bring that into teacher education also, of understanding these tools and getting to know them first before we can understand how to bring them into the classroom. And it's there's a lot of work being done on how we can use them for, these tools for assessment and how they can use them for different things. But that's for us as adults using the tools. How can we get the children using these tools in the classroom is yet another aspect of it. And that brings us back to the Montessori triangle here, where we have the teacher, the environment, and the child. And so, of course, what is our job? Our job as adults is to prepare that environment, to understand what technologies we're bringing in, to bring them in, to really to analyze each tool that we decide to bring into our classroom and understand why we're doing it. What is the purpose of this tool? What do we think it will promote? And then we have to understand, how are we then going to present it to the children to link them to that environment? What is the best way for them to use it? And we're not going to do that by just having the classroom full of these technologies and thinking that they're going to just start experimenting. It's a step-by-step process. I just think about the way we present a tool in our three to, in the book I talk about a set of watercolor paints. When we are presenting painting to a 3 to 6 year old, step by step, one isolated concept at a time, but we're building on it. And once the child has the skills, they are practicing and practicing until the point where they are ready to take the watercolor set and create a painting because they're doing a project, or they want to express something. And that is exactly what we need to think about here, is what tools are we bringing in? How do we present them step by step to the point where the child is then able to have the enough knowledge to take it further themselves, to teach themselves, right? Just as we would with any of the materials, the Montessori materials that we all know and love, we do present it until the child is connected to it, and off they go. We're asking questions, we're experimenting, we're finding new ways of using it, and we're putting words on our learning. That's the same kind of thing that we need to do with our tools. Whatever it is that we're bringing in, we need to go so that we're preparing ourselves, we're understanding what tools we're bringing in, we're preparing the environment, we have it on the shelf. It's just as if it's any other material, exactly the way we want it to be, with as prepared as it can be, so that it can be used independently by the child, who will then teach themselves through these materials. And that's, if we can start seeing these tools as materials, just like any other material in the classroom, but it requires that we learn them first, just like we do our Montessori training, so that we make all our albums and we spend hours practicing with materials, so that we can present it clearly and specific purpose to the children, who then take the material and use it further for their learning. Yeah. The other aspect of the technology is bringing it in as part of our grace and courtesy, and this is one of the biggest things that I think we need to consider. Um, I saw that Mara was joining here, and Mara was one of the ones presenting. I have something in a couple of slides in a minute, something from the Montessori event in 2025, so last year. And this was, again, the same thing. Digital citizenship is part of the grace and courtesy. And we don't have to wait and start with this in adolescence. This needs to begin with the youngest children. And we're already doing this work with them in the foundation, in the 0 to 6 years. We're already working with them about empathy and respect and all of these aspects, so that when we then move it into the classroom, and it becomes that it's not just our classroom environment, but it's now we have access to a global environment where the respect and the responsibility, privacy, truth, empathy, all of these things are that much more important, that much more vital, that we have set the foundation for. And this is something that we need to work with from the very beginning. And I would argue that this is something we do before we even introduce any kind of tool, that we're working with this so that on that foundation is where we can then build and bring in a new tool. And then with that foundation of grace and courtesy, with this digital citizenship, we have something to build on. And so then that fear of, oh no, what are they going to do with it? We can begin to start trusting the child because we've built this foundation and we trust them to take it further. But of course, there are guidelines. Of course, we are there observing. Of course, we're there to support and guide. Yeah. Montessori writes in From Childhood to Adolescence, the machine is like an extra adaptable limb of modern man. It is the slave of civilization. And then she says something that I think this is really where I feel a lot of adults are here, and something we really need to make sure that we are aware of. But beware, for the man of ill will may be rendered dangerous by machinery. And this is again back to that intention behind the invention. His influence may become unlimited as the speed of communication increases. Again, even more relevant today, as we know. But then she writes something that I think is so key. Therefore, a new morality, individual and social, must be our chief consideration in this new world. And I think this is just emphasizing that need for the grace and courtesy, this new morality. What does it mean, this digital citizenship? How do we understand our role, both as an individual and as a society, of how we're building this new world? And of course, insert AI here, insert any new emerging technology. Imagine that new morality that we have to have as an individual and then as a society. And we know that Montessori writes about how and spoke very often about how the child through education will bring about peace. And this is, I think, part of that work that we're doing here is for a more peaceful society, because we're building it off of this foundation that we talked about. And this is the slide that I wanted to refer back to the Montessori event from last year. And there was a day, Maura was along in it, about AI digital citizenship in Montessori. And this concentric circles that were presented. And then of course I added my inner circle, because what was they found with UNESCO, they found that they were introducing the tools, and then they realized in order to understand the tools, we need to do some digital literacy, some critical thinking and evaluation. Oh, and then in the middle we have, oh, right, we can't forget humanity. And yet, if you think about it from a Montessori perspective, we turn it from the inside out. We start at the beginning, we start in the middle. We start with grace and courtesy. We are adding on critical thinking through all the work we're doing in the classroom. And we're building then digital literacy. We're building this literacy in these skills, media literacy, all of these things, where we then can use these tools. The basic use of tools can then be on that foundation. Then we can use them for creative expression and for creating new things. So I think this, when we have our grace and courtesy at the core, I think this is where it becomes even more a stronger foundation that we in the Montessori world, we have the answers to this. If we're thinking about how we're going to meet the digital world, we have the way of introducing it with our children if we can do it in this way, human first, and then working a way up to come to the tools. And that brings us to another of my favorite quotes. We don't think of Montessori as writing perhaps about technology, but oh yes, she does. She just calls them machines, but she has written quite a bit about this, and nearly could, has seen the future and what we need to be looking at. So here in the 1946 London lecture, she writes that the children of today will make all the discoveries of tomorrow. All the discoveries of mankind will be known to them, and they will improve what has been done, and they will make fresh discoveries. And we can see that happening. So the children of today who were born into these as digital natives, they're going to be making all the discoveries that we're going to just, be sitting back in our old age wondering at how amazing all of these tools are, and, not understanding, just like my parents aren't understanding how half of the technologies are working today. And yet they're going to be making these fresh discoveries. So what is important is what she writes that next. The future generation must not only know how to do what we can teach them, but they must be able to go a step further. And how are they going to go a step further? We need to have given them this foundation. We can only teach them so much. We can only prepare them in the way that we know, because it requires us to understand it. And we won't understand it in the same way that they will. We're going to present a tool to our children, to our students, and they're going to take it and they're going to run with it and be able to do so much more than I could imagine doing with them, because it's just in there, it's just intuitive for them. So they're not going to just know what we can teach them. They're going to take it a step further, many steps further. And they're going to need that foundation that we give them, that integrity, that ethical responsibility as they're taking it, as they're going steps further. So that when they're now creating technologies, what is guiding them is the humanness of it, right? It's keeping that human soul at the heart of it, rather than just allowing the tools to take over. That then brings me to the discussion of AI, of course. And this is again where we have so many of these fears coming up, and all of the things now, of course, in this country, it's close to them banning AI in the elementary schools and only under direct supervision in the secondary schools. And again, we can have a discussion on banning. We know what happens when you ban things. Well, they're just going to find sneakier ways to use it. They're still going to use it. Banning does not work. However, just tossing everything at them also doesn't work. So we need to get this balance. We need to get this balance in the way we are introducing it. So when it comes to AI, before they even touch it, well, in the classroom at least, they're obviously using it in technologies around in the world without even knowing they're using the AIs. But when we are going to use it as a tool in the classroom, they first need to know, what is it? How does it work? Does it actually think? Can it feel like a human? Can it be creative like a human? And we need to have these discussions. So at our conference again in at Montessori Europe, I presented some materials that I made to help children, well, and in this case adults, understand, what is an AI? How does it think? How does it go from one decision to the next in order to give us the output that takes us, we see it in a couple of seconds, but all the processes that are going through the thinking process of an AI, so that we can help the children understand the tools that they are going to be using. And that is one of the most important things, I think, that we start with these hands-on materials that we know it functions. This methodology works. And if we can start with these concrete, what does she call them? Materialized abstractions. We take these abstract concepts, that AI is a very abstract concept, and can we make them into concrete, understandable, manipulative activities that will help the children understand it before they get into an AI bot and start a conversation, so that they understand the implications of what they're doing with these tools. And I think this really is at the core of everything that we're going to do in the classroom with children, with our adolescents. It needs to be that we understand what it's all about and show them how it works before we allow them to be able to use it just freely. And And Dr. Lane Freeman uses this, the AI sandwich, which I talk about all the time. And we make sure that whenever we're using AI as a tool, that it starts with a human idea, our first draft, our ideas, our curiosity, and our prior knowledge, of course. We then can use the AI as a tool, but then what do we do again after we're using it so that we comes back to that human, that reflection, the fact checking? Is it hallucinating, or is this true? Again, lateral reading so that we know where our sources are coming from. All of these questions that we want when we're looking at sources, so that it's not just feed it in, get it back, and go with it. And when we can be users of it in this way, responsible users, that is a huge responsibility also, because then we're also along in training the AIs to have this equitable thinking also, so that the biases that are there, we can help to train it for the good. I have a colleague who always says that, for people who say, I'm not going to use it because I don't want to be along in, using this tool. No, we good people need to be using it. We need to be there to help influencing it and to help it to train it so that we can be a counterweight to all the garbage that's being fed into it also. I think that's a huge responsibility for us. So that when we're working with our students using AI, using any tool, we make sure that it comes from our human first perspective, where our ideas are there. We use it as a co-pilot, as a co-thinker, as something to brainstorm with, but then to take it out again and continue with our human creativity and our ideas. And that cycle needs to be constantly and ongoing. It's when we then just plug things in and take it out and keep going that we see studies, we see the research on this also, where the creative thinking is going down, the critical thinking is sinking in levels as well. And so we're not activating the brain in the ways that we should be, but we can be. We can be using the tools in the correct way. This is a quote that I added here because this is from a new book that Montessori Pearson Publishing just put out. It's called Cosmic Education by Maria Montessori, but this particular quote comes from the editor's note that Alison Oz wrote at the beginning. And she writes that Maria Montessori emphasizes the adaptation to the wider world and to humanity, envisioning children who can respond practically and intelligently to the realities of their own epoch. And then, of course, going on that all of these other tools and things that are there, she couldn't necessarily imagine the tools that we're working with, but still, human intelligence, grounded in choice, needs to operate here. We need to invite children to see, as the last cosmic agents entering an already complex supernature, that among their cosmic tasks is future participation in these systems in service to humanity and maintenance of balance. And I think this just really sort of sums up that whole message, is that we need to make sure that it is this bringing it back to the humanity in service of humanity. So these tools aren't allowed to just go and take on a life of their own. We need to be those who are helping to ground it in us, in the humanity, for the betterment, for the service of humanity, but also to help to maintain this balance. Without this balance, we will lose the control, lose the humanity, because we are not preparing children for a digital world. We're preparing them to remain human within it, within whatever the world may come, may bring, may throw at us next. Whatever it might be, we need to prepare them to remain and to promote that humanity, to be the social beings that we are, to help, to be helping each other, in service of each other, and to be able to communicate in a way that promotes this, and not just where we just need to know how to cope with the tools, right? And I think this is one of the biggest things to consider whenever we're using any of the tools. And of course, if I had a few more days with you all, we'd be able to get into what kind of tools, what kind of recommendations, and all of these things. But whatever it is that we bring in, we really need to take a step back and look at, first of all, how was it produced and for what purpose was this produced, this tool? What was it created for? What is behind it also? But then when we bring it in, what can the students do? What are they learning? Is it just another tool because it looks fun, or is there a purpose behind what we're doing when we bring these tools in? And there are many, many wonderful examples in the participation in the participants here. I know Mara has done many wonderful talks about the purposeful activities that she does with her students, with for example 3D printing and different technologies that are used in service of humanity and to help and to promote this togetherness, this society. So if we can keep that at the center, then I think all of these fears, they're there to help keep that balance also, because if we didn't have fear, we wouldn't have caution, I think. But we need to understand these tools first. And when we understand them, then we can proceed. When Montessori was, looking at how to present the practical life activities to the 3 to 6 year olds, she for these different activities. And we need to have that same scientific mind where we can break it down and analyze it before we bring it into the classroom. How are we going to show them how to use it? And how can we promote creative expression through these tools? So that brings me to the end here. Feel free, please, to contact me with any questions, but I'd love to open it up for any questions and a discussion as we go here. So I'm going to just stop sharing here to see if there's more comments that came in. And
I know Monica was asking if there's a opportunity to have a copy of the presentation.
of course, well, Lindsay, I guess I can send it to you, and you can send it out as you will have the you will have the list of participants. I won't get involved in that, but of course, I will. I would love to share it. I think it's important to share primarily because of all these wonderful quotes that are there, and
Yes.
these are for those who are also meeting resistance of, well, Montessori would never want technology in the classroom. Well, when we have her own words, it's hard to, discuss against that. But at the same time, it's with that caution and with that care of how we do. Yeah. Yeah.
Yes. Dr. Tabor says parents, caregivers, siblings all have a role in providing the modeling appropriate use and having conversations explaining the why, how, when for the use of technology. And I would add to that many times parents don't have the same perspective about
Mm.
appropriate use or even understand the developmental impacts.
Yeah.
And so I know as a school leader, we had guest speakers come in so that we could really
Yeah.
effectively partner with parents so they could be on the same page with us. I totally agree with Dr. Tabor. Our parents, siblings, caregivers, really, it's so important to partner with them so that they have the tools and the understanding.
Yeah.
One of the guest speakers that we had come to our school was an optometrist
Yeah.
who, talked to parents about the impact of introducing, these devices to very young children
Yeah.
and how it was, changing the structure of the eye, and
Yeah.
that, very young children were experiencing nearsightedness because of this long-term prolonged exposure to these devices that were being held very close to their
Yeah.
faces
Yeah.
in strollers and high chairs and
Right.
etc. So
Yeah. But I think this is, again, it goes back to the practical life. One of the aspects of practical life is care of self. And
Yes.
these are things that we work on with our children to do. For example, if you're going to be working on a screen or on a, whatever it might be, okay, we set a timer so that after the 15 minutes we can do our body check, check my
Mhm.
shoulders, my neck, my eyes. And we were always, speaking of optometrists, we were always told the 20-20-20 rule. Every 20 minutes, you look away 20 feet for at least 20 seconds, so because we're not by, evolutionary wise, we are not made to be looking at things this close to our eyes and so on.
Sure.
So all of these things are to understand that it is my responsibility. And I think that is bringing the responsibility back to the children. We have to model good, responsible use, but also when we start banning, when we start making the rules, we're taking the opportunity for them to take good,
Mhm.
responsible choices away from the children. That
Mhm.
is why I have such an issue with the with the banning of anything, but it's really to have that open discussion about what is helpful, what is good for me now, what do I need, right? And to be
Mhm.
able to have that constant self-evaluation so that I make good choices, conscious choices of my use of
Right.
technology. Yeah. Yeah.
That's so true. And I think setting those standards, again, as a school leader, having those conversations with the adults on the campus, making sure that our first, focus is with the children and that we're modeling appropriate use. You
Yeah.
know,
Absolutely.
some of the things we put in writing were things, around the use of technology. So the adults who were caring for children knew that the attention had to be on the children at recess and not on the phones, right?
Yeah.
But it's a very, I'm pointing the finger at myself because, there's that sense of immediacy and, that impulse to pick up the phone and stay
Of course.
connected
Of
and,
course.
make sure I'm not missing anything is always there,
Yeah.
that sense of immediacy, but being able to put the phone down and
Yeah.
anymore, we've got the watches,
Yes. Yeah.
I don't know, a friend of mine was saying, it's like the Borg, resistance is futile. Like we're being plugged in. We've got all these devices. I have a friend who's got the glasses where you
Yeah.
can
Oh,
read
yes.
the
Oh, yeah.
messages and
Yeah.
so I think, like you said, monitoring our own diet of what we're taking in and how we're modeling that to the children.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
important.
But on that topic of our diet of it, there was a really interesting research here because they were comparing technology screen use really to, to it's addictive, it's like drugs and all of these things. And there was a psychologist who wrote a wonderful article. It's actually not addictive in itself. It is, do we have any addictive tendencies? Then yes, we will be more apt to get addicted to things. But she rather compared it to a balanced diet. We need technology just like we need food, but overeating will cause health issues. Overuse of technology where we're not looking at our good technology habits, just like food habits, can cause harm. And I think this is where we need to start thinking about it. Technology is there, it's how we use it. This balanced use of it is what we really need to work on. Yeah.
Monica
Yeah.
says she plans on displaying the sandwich. And
So
Melissa
important.
says, "Thank you so much. It's key that we do treat each tool like any other didactic material on the shelves and like the step-by-step lessons in our albums."
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, that's half of the book is like an album for technology. That's what I was trying to do because I realized that when I would travel around and speak with teachers and then go and do work with the students, it was the students took it immediately. They weren't the ones with the issues. It was the teachers who needed to spend that time to understand it. And I think that is what my focus has been, is helping to
Mhm.
give time and space for teachers to understand these things, to understand then how we can bring it into the classroom. Yeah.
Dr. Tabor says it's like Pandora's box. AI is here and it's only going to become more relevant to our lives. True.
And how
And
we can, yeah. Yeah.
Mara says, don't underestimate the wisdom of our students.
Mm.
Many of mine were clear about the dangers of technology addiction. They also spoke out against teachers using AI to write progress notes. They want the human interaction.
100%, Mara, thank you. This is so important because this is what it gets back to the courage to trust. I'm
Yes.
watching our young people and the way like they can spot a fake. They're like, oh, that's just AI trash, right? They have that understanding of what is it valuable, right?
Right.
They absolutely want the human that interaction. And we can see that sometimes they need guidance and they maybe need us to put up some help with structuring how much they use it or how they use it. But we need to allow them to make these realizations, to understand. They're so clear about the dangers of the of
Mhm.
addiction and of what can go wrong with these things, and they're understanding in a way that we actually cannot, because we
Mhm.
come from a different generation. We cannot understand it in the same way that they are intuitively understanding it. So we really need to follow them, to watch and understand and learn from our children as well, because they will teach us a whole lot about how to work with these technologies as well.
It's so true. And Sarah, I'm watching our time. I know it's coming up on 2 in the morning where you are. And I just want to reiterate how grateful we are for you spending your time and talents. You are indeed a treasure to all of us here. And we're so grateful for your wisdom and your message around Montessori in the digital age.
Thank, thank
So,
you very much. I just want to put this one up as
oh,
I
thank you,
promised I
Sarah.
would.
Yes, so
For
this
anyone who
is a
has
great
attended.
reminder. If you would like to receive a certificate of attendance, be sure to scan the QR code now, and we'll get that certificate to you for your participation in the colloquium. Thank you for being here today. And next month, we have Frank George, who will be joining us as our guest speaker, Frank George the Fourth. His topic is Rewilding Stewardship, Montessori Leadership in Late Stage Capitalism. So whether you can join us in person or watch our recordings, remember that the recording of Sarah's amazing presentation this evening will be on our YouTube channel. So share it with your friends and colleagues. Those resources are there for you, and they're always free. Sarasota does offer bachelor's, master's, and a doctoral program, and we're launching a high school dual enrollment option this fall. So we're super excited about that. If you're interested in any information about the programs that we offer, Ellen has just dropped the info at Sarasota University link in the chat. We'd love to speak with you and find out how we can support your academic goals. So again, Sarah, thank you so much for being here this evening.
Thank you.
Lots of thanks coming in the chat.
Thank
Your
you so much, everyone.
presentation was awesome, and we're just so grateful for you, Sarah. So get some sleep, and we'll hope to connect soon again.
Thank you
So
very much, everyone. Have a wonderful evening.
thank you,
Please,
you
please reach
too.
out.
Thanks, everybody. See you soon.
Bye
Bye bye.
Good
bye.
night.
Good night.